All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Episode 2, Season 7, Digital Grocer. And we have our special guest here. He is known in certain circles as a prolific actor and a newly minted director. I'm sorry, I keep reminding myself this is not a Theo Vaughn podcast. And my guest is not Ben Affleck. He is Todd Renaud. He's the CIO at Southeastern Grocers. Todd, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate the time, and I'm glad to know the $100 I gave you actually worked, and you can put me on film. So thank you.
Exactly. But you're forgetting about royalties and all those things after that, right?
Exactly. Well, we haven't signed that agreement just yet, so
Exactly.
we'll
Exactly.
see.
So one of the conversations that I have quite often with retailers is around artificial intelligence, large language modules, and how do you leverage them? And I think we're well past that year of kind of the hype cycle, the flirting of using certain things where people kind of flocked and started using, ChatGPT and other tools to do email, to do, writing documents and so on. And I really wanted to bring you on the show today to understand what are you and the team at Southeastern Grocers kind of doing with AI. So let's just jump right in with my first question. When I think of the big picture of AI, how is SEG leveraging it across your retail operations, and what are some of the strategic outcomes that you're targeting?
Great, thanks. So I would tell you we're really purposeful and strategic now about it. We started with earnest work about a year ago, and I'd say there's two levels of it right now. So we are still doing the efficiency play. So think about Copilot, Enterprise GPT, dabbling in the agents, things that really help our associates, help our team do the work they need to do it faster, maybe do it better, faster feedback loop. I would tell you we've also been partnering with some of the vendors that we have, and let me rephrase and say partnering with our partners to that end of how are they leveraging AI internally, and then how can we take advantage of that? And I think reality is they're using a moniker of AI on something they already had, or it's really not the type of AI that we're thinking about in the future. But there are partners who are actually doing some real work with that. Analytics, procurement, the service we provide the customers. Also, we're big into the rewards and loyalty space. We have a very robust and effective program that our customer marketing team has put in place, and it's really our go-to market for the organization. So personalization is a really big area as well. If I had to really put those, though, into a couple of areas of focus today, is chatbots. So think about chatbots that help the stores, that are customer facing, or that support corporate. Personalized offers and pricing. How do we utilize AI to do that, both internally, so pricing mechanisms helping us do that in a way that can be done faster and more personalized, but also, efficient for us. And then how do we take those offers to you, the customer, both on shelf and in our mobile app, as an example. And then really looking at things like inventory control, theft detection. So these rely a little bit more on some vision AI work that's there. And then I could go down the list without, spending a ton of time, and just say partnerships with forecasting and replenishment, any type of product merchandising. There's AI activity going on in there as well. So, the goals are no different than anyone else. We want to, grocery's easy in theory, hard in practice, but we buy goods, we move goods, and we sell goods. And we want to make sure that the customer has what they need when they need it. And so that's what we're looking to achieve with all of this.
That's great. And so my next question is, when you think of in grocery in its totality, and where do you see AI driving the most value?
That's a good question. It's a boring answer. I'm still going to come back to the efficiency play in, your corporate office. We have a saying here, which is there's no checkout stand at the corporate office. We exist to serve, and we spend money, and you got to sell groceries to pay for us. So the more efficient we can make ourselves in the back office, the better for everybody at the company. And then ultimately, again, the customer. Outside of that, I think anywhere analytics and analysis of patterns of behavior is really a place that AI can make a huge difference. Now, in grocery, we're going to see that in supply chain. So smarter forecasting, reduce waste. The customer personalization, the right offer at the right time, super important for us and super important for the customer. You're bombarded with all these offers. You want when you're in the store, you want the offers for the products you need that day. And how do we get to that? I think you can go some of the other places, labor efficiency in the stores, shrink, a big deal for grocery, and then service. But I really would say the personalization, the supply chain aspects to me are the biggest areas from grocery that you're going to see it move to the bottom line and increase sales and keep customers happy. And that's really the most important part in how we sell groceries.
So my view, if I can
Yeah,
pontificate here, is
absolutely.
start with the mundane stuff.
Yep.
The things that are just so routine, but also are a huge time suck in certain things,
Hmm.
right? Leverage it. An
Agreed.
example is, I think no different than you, we operate on a much smaller scale with a lot of vendors and partners. And so the frequency of getting contracts and
Yeah.
amendments to those is quite high. And we have a very small team. And we're also very careful in controlling our legal costs. So my view is, as opposed to paying an attorney to summarize or read a contract for you, and again, I'm not suggesting everyone should do this. I think AI
Yeah.
comes in really well to summarize something for you.
Well,
Right.
look, I'll add on to that and tell you that that's something we're actually doing with IT procurement. Is we have a separate legal department, and we do daily. We deal with contracts and amendments and terms, and then you got to start looking in some cases at service level agreements, and all the aspects of that. And so one of the ways that we can help that process is to actually in IT do a review of that information ahead of time before we get it to legal. If you look at the time value of someone's hour, everyone's important, but a lawyer can be expensive, especially if you have to go outside counsel. So we know what we like for indemnity clauses. We know what we like for exit, terms of convenience, things of that nature. And we've built that knowledge up. So we've actually trained a agent chatbot to reference that. So we can take a contract, put pieces in there, and it will tell us, hey, this aligns, this doesn't, and we can fine tune that before we insert it into the process. We've also had one great example where buried deep in the contract was a date inconsistency. So we were being charged a certain way over certain dates, and in there the date was incorrect, and actually the chatbot found that. So not that we might not have found it anyway, but we certainly weren't going to find it in about 30 seconds. I think you've brought one good example that we've used already.
Yeah, that's a great example. There's another one, if I can contribute one, helping at a
Yeah.
small firm dealing with an IP infringement matter.
Mm, yeah.
Specific patent, and normally you'd want to get the case history on a patent. So you have to call a lawyer. They have to go to a patent agent. Patent agent has to pull up the case history, download the PDFs. You have to pay for that service. They send it to you. You have to read it. Using AI, we're able to kind of get the whole case history and even
Yeah.
undisclosed information that was available on the web, which is a great time saver, also a dollar saver. I struggle to draft this next question. And I
Yeah.
struggle because I think it's where a lot of corporations really, really trip up when they're considering injecting that cultural DNA around AI, getting their toe in the water. And I want to get from your perspective, how do you structure your team to operationalize AI?
Yeah, this is something we've been actually going back and forth even as recently as today, trying to work through that. So let me start first with I'd heard a concept about the NASA space program back in the 60s when they wanted to go to the moon. And you had the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo missions. And so if you take the goal of Mercury was to orbit a human, test space survival, kind of do the starting stuff. Gemini was to start testing and building all of the components that had to be put together to eventually do what the Apollo mission did, which was land and return humans from the moon. And so it's like a stair step, and they overlapped each other. And so we took our AI in the same way, a journey. So number one is a foundation is building a launch system, we called it. And this is the boring stuff. Most people don't want to do this, but we really focused on process and governance and security. Why? Because I believe you got to hit that head on. It's going to be there whether you like it or not. And in fact, I feel strongly if you can satisfy some of those areas initially, you don't get as much pushback from people and the company because of the fear that's out there about AI even today. So the second piece, which goes with the Gemini, was how do we get that lift off into the IA space? So we did and executed some platform-based POCs and first offerings. So we did a Copilot, we did an enterprise GPT. We actually built our own on a third one. And then for a fourth one, we partnered with somebody with their technology. And really seeing what does it take to do each of these. And there are all these different components. And then if you get to the Apollo mission, part of it, it's the feedback loop. So now we know what we can do internally and we can't. What were we successful with? How do we need to educate and perform differently? And now I can look at a much more ambitious and impactful approach to using AI. So to get back to answering your question a bit more, we're oscillating between what I call a hub and spoke in a way, is even though there's one and the same. We started an AI COE. We hired actually an analyst and we hired a technical person, programmer, developer, someone deep into the AI space. And then we put a leader in place. And we then started thinking about, okay, the hubs is certainly that, but the spokes ends up being the different teams out there. So there's customer and digital finance people. I could go through all the traditional places that you would have that. And we would push that technology out into that. And what I'm finding is initially the momentum and the passion might not be there. And so then the COE is pushed, baby out into the world and finds out it's struggling, or worse, it gets eaten, and you lose that inertia and momentum. And so I would tell you, we haven't actually quite figured out which one works best for us. Now, we have a small team. We're a good sized company, but we're really introducing this out into the wild, shall we say, of the business. And so I think we'll end up being centralized more for a bit. And we do have evangelists out there that are doing this on their own. We actually have a lot of agents being created. We did a massive Copilot rollout. We did education, we did help desk hours, we did multiple collaboration opportunities, and we've seen some huge usage metrics that has stuck thus far for about 2 months. Ask me again in 6 and we'll see. But what we're finding is there's a lot of evangelists out there that picked this up and ran with it. Now we're going to get into sprawl. You got too many, they need support, they don't work as well. What happens if security wasn't set right somewhere? I mean, there's some challenges, no different than any other business. But we think with the governance and a delivery model that's centralized as a hub, but we start pushing out the spokes. And then also, we'll be in a good spot. And the final thing I would say on this one, give you a chance to weigh in, because I'd be curious what you're seeing out there as well, is we want to talk about the art of the possible. So we are also introducing a GPT, let's say, for example, that does X. And we want to say, hey, did you know you can do this? Or we will go find use case scenarios and partner with the business to come up with an example and then let them take it from there. Because I still think the art of the possible is one of the biggest challenges you can have to rolling out something like this. So I'll stop there. I could probably go on for more, but at the end of the day, it's going to say it depends. When you ask me, I'll tell you how we're organized. I think it's going to change over time.
So the concept that you're suggesting is right, because the reality is any corporation that gets a certain size, unless there's a separate team to decouple from the day-to-day, the mandate isn't as strong when you have to do that and everything else. And so the goal, the idea of getting to a finish line of something that's still very fluid and dynamic becomes a bit buried in the minutia. But at the same time is when you're not involved in it and you're at the periphery and you're going to be receiving something. And that's where we're today, when talking to other retailers, that's where they're seeing the resistance of adoption. And it's almost, and there's a couple of large Canadian non-governmental agencies now that just did a massive Microsoft Copilot release. And they've taken the same approach that Southeastern Grocers has. I think a little bit of the difference is that they're letting it run rampant, have anyone build anything they want, and then pull it back from there. So I also appreciate the book that you're quoting, which I think is the book you're quoting, Failure is Not an Option, which is the whole
Yeah.
history of the
Yeah.
pre-Apollo program right up to Apollo 13. So great
Yeah.
book.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think the space program is immensely interesting for IT because you think about the achievements they made. I mean, I always laugh, they went to the moon with slide rules and some really smart people. I mean, and then we complain if we can't get our Excel to work, and that's why we couldn't make something happen for a meeting or an analysis or something. I mean, it's almost like we've digressed, right? We've gotten lazy. And so I think you can take so much from the way that you approach your work, especially in technology at the company, from what the space program does. I mean, obviously it has its failures and its problems, as evidenced by the book, but I really think it's a great one. You mentioned one little key point that you mentioned in there was about education and pushing it out and letting things go rampant. I mean, I referenced it a little bit, but I think about AI fluency, that you can build this and you do it through awareness and readiness and engagement. And so we did a road show. I mean, we definitely were very thoughtful about that. And we've given the tool and the agent and to anyone who wants it to be able to go, and they all have a license for it. So to your point, I think there's a lot of agents out there we don't know about. There's no telling what people are doing. We did this also because I wanted to have it in our tenant. I wanted to do our best job of making sure that information doesn't land there in GPT somewhere, which of course, look, at every company, someone can still go use their chat GPT at home and, what can you do about it? But if you provide them an opportunity with all the functionality they're going to need, almost everyone will use it that way. And so you do have some of that governance for that. And then the ongoing education is going to be huge. I mean, it's the biggest challenge right now is, and you see it everywhere in the paper, is people worried about using AI because it's going to put them out of work. And we're very much a people oriented company. In fact, we pride ourselves on being, we're in the people business. We just happen to sell groceries. And so the goal never is to put someone out of a job. But I think if you took an attitude of we're not going to embrace new technology and innovate, we'd still be using clay tablets. And so jobs are going to change. I used to believe AI would challenge those who knew less or were less skilled. I actually think it's actually helping them rise to the occasion, because whereas they might have struggled to do some analysis or to write a memo or to create a presentation, they now have a tool that can do that. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking to give people what they need to make the best of the work that they have and the best of themselves. And so I actually have kind of swung back over saying, certainly, look, at the end of the day, AI is going to do something that someone has a job with today, but you're going to have to create three other jobs to enable that to happen. And so the
Yeah.
trick is making sure you're training your team and they can use AI to do it so they can be in one of those three jobs down the road. So a lot of opportunity, I think.
You're right. And it's one of these rare moments in history. And I think no different than you. I haven't been too long on the planet here to be able to quote
Yeah.
this, but AI has empowered the end consumer faster than the enterprise.
Yep.
So
Good way to
take
put
away
it.
the noise of NVIDIA and all the back end technology. I get it's the CPU requirements and infrastructure. It's important. But it seems it's like this jumped the enterprise extremely quick compared to some other techs that have been developed
Yeah.
over time, almost overnight. I think that it will be where the white collar job was the equalizer to the blue collar job, because today it's still today in certain markets being a blue collar worker is not seen as being as good as being a white collar worker. I think that being an AI builder will level set you against someone that is a good, strong thinker. Where with the tech in the hands of the right person, will know the right question, will take full advantage of it. And I think this is what we all need to be ready for moving forward.
So great. Let me pose a question back to you because I've read a couple articles and thought about this. How do you feel about AI? People and articles saying AI is going to make us dumber in the future because you aren't challenging yourself, your brain, you aren't stretching neurons, shall we say, to do analytics, to write a document. And it's no different than thinking about the idea of why does someone do Sudoku or crossword puzzle because it's mentally challenging. They talk about as you get older, you want to continue to challenge yourself mentally. And yet now in a lot of jobs, you could use AI to do everything. You talk about the equalization or the comparison, even forget equalization or anything between white collar and blue collar jobs. What do you think about, does it make you dumber from that perspective? Does it actually make everyone kind of come to the muddy middle and all be equal no matter what you're doing? And I
Yeah,
hate to use the word equal. That doesn't come out right, correct? Because this is a non-human view is what I'm
yeah,
talking about. It's your skills and the value is what I'm saying.
I see it in phases. And I would say I'm living through one of those phases now and more concerned about the second phase. I think the first phase is you become desensitized on the transparency and candor in what's being written back from an AI engine, which you may be sending out to an individual or group of individuals.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So an example is you could be, I'll give you a great example because today I was really time pressed. We're doing a deep security review across a series of pieces of technology. We have a group of security experts doing a review with our CISO. So I got to let the team know. So I went to ChatGPT and I asked the question, acting as a COO, but I'm really not thinking about how this message is going to be received. I'm not asking it to write it with empathy and like I'm not asking those things. I think when you go down that rabbit hole, eventually you could fall into a copy and paste situation, right? Which you really want to avoid. The second one is you become less curious. And so it's to your point, if you're in the middle of something that's really important and maybe not part of your sphere of expertise, or maybe it is and it's a stretch, and normally you would go research it, you'd find someone, you'd talk to them, you'd go take a course. I don't know, there's so many ways you can bridge a gap on knowledge here. You may completely skip that and you become surface level, and eventually, I hate to say it, you're the 18 inches between you, the keyboard, and the AI engine, and just sending information out. And then as humans, we will start questioning, what's my purpose? What's my value? I don't think we've hit that crisis just yet, but we will. We will hit that.
Yeah, actually, if I take your example, I would say the crisis hits when the majority of the people you interact with are doing the same thing. There was a podcast about 6 or 8 months ago, and a gentleman he partnered with some third-party firms to create a digital self, and he did it to answer scammer calls and do all of that. And at some point, he actually connected two of his AIs, started having a conversation together. And you also see out there, you have to start thinking about AI bots on your website as being a customer, don't you? I mean, if you're selling groceries online, somebody's going to be creative. If they, of course, they have already done it. They're ordering groceries on your site. Well, if you're competing on price or you're competing with other companies that sell groceries online, do you have to start marketing to the AI? Well, of course you do. If the AI bot works like that, so I think once that proliferates and becomes more common, to go back to your point, I think that's where you're going to start to have some real change. Today, I think personally, not everyone's really using it or using it all the time like that. So you can, quote, either get away with it or excel using it or something of that nature. And to your point, people's interest levels are short, attention spans are short. So they're just going to look for some certain pieces of information and go to there. I do think it can help with curiosity, though, Sylvain. I mean, you can have it keep asking questions, or you can keep asking questions for it. So I don't know. It's still developing.
Absolutely. And the speed at which it's going, I'm sure we will find that next hurdle to crest over.
Yeah.
Sir, I want to say thank you for joining us on Digital Grocer.
Well, you're welcome.
And for those of you who want to get a hold of Todd, you can find him on LinkedIn, and I'm sure you can just DM him any of your questions.
Great. Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on the show.
Thank you, sir. That's it for the first half of our conversation with Todd Renaud of Southeastern Grocers. We'll be back soon with the second half of the interview. And guess what? You're not going to want to miss it. Don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube or follow us on Spotify.